Short is the story, long is the life.
Wukong's archive presents China Urban Legends, the Spring-Autumn Tower of Xuchang.
Xuchang lies in the middle of Hunan, and the Beijing-Guangzhou Railway passes through it. Heading south from Zhengzhou by train, 40 minutes after you pass Chang'e, you reach Xuchang. In terms of fame, Xuchang isn't at the top of Hunan. It can't compare with Luoyang or Kaifeng. But in terms of history, few places can match it. It was once a national capital. The last emperor of the Han Dynasty lived here. In the late Eastern Han, Cao moved Emperor Xian of Han from Luoyang to Su County and renamed it Shudu. For the next 25 years, all the decrees of the Great Han Dynasty were issued from this city. In the 25th year of Zhenan, Cao Pai accepted the abdication at Fanyang, south of Shudu. Emperor Xian surrendered the realm, and the Han Dynasty was finished. So Xuchang has an old saying, "The Han arose in Chang'an and died in Su." The people of Xuchang themselves put it even eerier. Right here, they say, is where the last breath of a dynasty was buried. Where that breath is buried, opinions differ. Some say under the Shouchan Abdication Platform, some say under Baling Bridge, and still others say inside the Spring and Autumn Tower, Chuanqiulu. People in Xuchang like to use old words when they talk. They call tomorrow Ming'er, yesterday Yurj, and squatting Gujio. On the old walls in town, every now and then you can pry out a Han Dynasty brick, grayish-blue, stamped with cord fiber marks, the cracks stuffed with centuries of dirt. Xuchang people don't think anything of it. First, let me explain what the Spring and Autumn Tower is. That has to go back 1800 years. In the 5th year of Zhenan, Cao marched east to attack Suzhou. Liu Bei was defeated and fled, and Guan Yu was captured. Cao thought highly of Guan Yu and treated him extremely well. He granted him the title Marquis of Hanzhou and gave him a mansion. The mansion was split into 2 courtyards. The outer one housed Guan Yu's 2 sisters-in-law, and the inner one housed Guan Yu himself. Guan Yu never stopped thinking about Liu Bei. He treated Cao's mansion as if it were a camp tent, lighting a lamp to read the Spring and Autumn Annals every night, reading all night long. When dawn came, the lamp was still burning. Later generations built a tower on the spot where he read by candlelight at night, and called it the Spring and Autumn Tower. When it came to Guan Yu, Cao really spent whatever it took. A small banquet every 3 days, a grand banquet every 5 days, gold when he mounted his horse, silver when he dismounted, and he also gave him 10 beautiful women. Guan Yu sent all the women to the outer courtyard to serve his 2 sisters-in-law, and never touched a single one. Cao then gave him a horse named Red Hair, and Guan Yu knelt down and bowed immediately. Cao asked him, "I gave you gold, silver, and beautiful women, and you never bowed. I give you a horse, and you pay me such a heavy courtesy." Guan Yu said, "This horse can travel 1,000 li in a day. With it, the day I learn of my elder brother's whereabouts, I can go to his side that very day." When Cao heard this, his heart skipped a beat. He didn't say anything out loud, but later he told people, "Guan Yu is a man you can't hold on to." The tower was rebuilt in the Qing dynasty. It has 3 stories, each smaller than the one below. Blue brick at the base, timber structure above, with upturned eaves and soaring corners. On the top floor sits a statue of Guan Yu. Phoenix eyes, silkworm eyebrows, a face the color of a dark red date. His left hand strokes his beard. His right hand holds a scroll, and on the cover of the book are written 3 characters: Spring and Autumn.
That afternoon when I got there, I went up to the 3rd floor first to look at the statue. It wasn't tall, just a bit over 2 meters, but seated there it pressed down on you until you couldn't breathe. On the offering table in front of the statue were 2 lit candles, and several sticks of incense stuck in the burner, with ash fallen all over the table. Old Zhou said the candles were bought from the temple, lit during the day, put out at night, every day the same. Incense was also offered by someone every day.
I asked him, who looks after these at night? Old Joe said, no one. The place clears out at 5, the door gets locked, and nobody's in the tower. I said, then the candles go out at night. Who lights them the next day? Old Joe said, I light them in the daytime. Sometimes, he paused, then said, sometimes, when I open the door in the morning, the candles are already burning. The first few years I thought it was a thief. Later I got used to it. I said, a thief stealing candles?
Old Joe didn't answer. He lit a cigarette, took a drag, and said, if you hear anything at night, don't go upstairs. The first night, I heard that sound.
The eastern side courtyard wasn't far from the main building, separated by a moon gate in between. I have trouble sleeping in a strange bed, and with old Joe's words on my mind, I tossed and turned and couldn't get to sleep until well past midnight. Around just after 12, a sound suddenly came from over by the building, like someone reading aloud.
The sound came through a courtyard wall and a floor slab, muffled, but you could make out the words. It rose and fell in cadence, like recitation on an opera stage, but heavier than that, each word and sentence drawn out long, with an indescribable accent. I lay in bed and listened for a while, thinking it was old Joe in the gatehouse listening to his radio. He had a Red Lantern brand radio in his room, and during the day it was always on, playing Hunan Juizi. I threw on my clothes and went out, planning to tell old Joe to turn the sound down. The gatehouse was dark. I went up to the window and looked in. Old Joe was asleep on his bed, the radio on the table, off. The sound was still going. From upstairs.
I stood in the courtyard and looked up, following the sound. It really was coming from the main building, more exactly from the third floor, the floor with the Guan Yu statue. The night was still, and the sound was like a thread, squeezing out through the cracks of the third-floor window and dropping into the yard.
I went back to my room and woke Master. He's a light sleeper, he woke at a single push. He listened for a moment, then sat up and said, that's reading of classical Chinese.
I said, who the hell is reading classical Chinese upstairs in the middle of the night?
Master didn't say anything. He got dressed, picked up the flashlight, and said, let's go up and look. The two of us came out of the eastern courtyard, passed through the moon gate, and entered the main building. The building door had been locked by old Joe during the day, a padlock hung on the hasp, locked good and tight. Master shone the flashlight on the lock, then on the door, and said, locked. The sound came through the crack of the door, even clearer than it was in the courtyard. I made out a few word sounds, something like, spring and autumn, sleigh, and after that I couldn't hear it clearly. Master said, go up or not?
I said, go up.
We walked up the wooden stairs. The stairs were old timber, creaking with every step. When we reached the landing between the second and third floors, the sound suddenly stopped, as if someone had heard the noise and fallen quiet. The third floor was dark. As the flashlight beam swept around, the statue sat there upright and proper, the windows closed, the room completely empty. But the two candles in front of the statue were burning. I remembered clearly, during the day old Joe said no one lights candles at night. The candles were newly lit, only a short bit burned down, the flames perfectly steady, not flickering, not swaying. There was no wind on the third floor, the windows were shut, so logically the flames shouldn't have been that steady, so steady that it felt like someone had just stepped away. I stood on the third floor, a chill running down my back. Master didn't speak. He walked a full circle around the statue and shone the flashlight on its face. He said, let's go. On the way downstairs, I asked him, what was the deal with the candles? Master said, don't know.
I said, aren't you the one who pays respects at temples? Did you pay respects?
Master said, I did. I paid respects as soon as I entered the building. Back in the room, I lay down and tossed and turned, unable to sleep, my mind full of those 2 candles. Master wasn't asleep either. Through the wall, he said to me, "Under this building, I'm afraid there really is something pressed down there."
I said, "You believe in this stuff too?"
Master said, "I don't. But I've repaired temples for 20 years, and I know one principle: 9 out of 10 strange happenings in a temple are caused by whatever's buried underneath."
The next morning, I went up to the 3rd floor on purpose to look. Those 2 candles had burned all the way down, and the candle tears had flowed along the altar table's edge and congealed into 2 hanging streams, like someone had cried. I cleaned up the candle wax and wiped the altar table clean. When I wiped near the statue, for no reason at all, I looked up. The statue's eyes, half open, half closed, were looking right at me. In daylight, it looked that way too, but at that moment, my heart still gave a jolt. The next morning, I ran into the tour guide Xiao Lu in the courtyard.
Xiao Lu is a guide hired by the Spring and Autumn Tower Cultural Relics Management Office. She's a local girl, 22 or 23, with a ponytail and a quick tongue. When she heard we'd gone up to the tower at night, her eyes lit up. She said, "You heard it too?"
I said, "You know about that sound?"
Xiao Lu said, "I've worked here 4 years, and I've heard it twice."
She lowered her voice and said, "Both times were around the 13th of the 5th lunar month. The 13th of the 5th month is the day Guan Gong sharpens his blade. As the old saying goes, Guan Gong needs water to sharpen his sword, so it usually rains that day. Those 2 years, around the 13th of the 5th month, I was on the evening shift. After clearing the site, as dusk fell, the sound would start in the tower. I didn't dare go upstairs, so I just listened from below. The voice would chant for a while, then stop for a while, and keep going until deep into the night, then stop on its own. One year, on the 13th of the 5th month, it rained all night. When the rain stopped, the sound stopped too, more accurate than a clock."
I said, "Did you ever make out what it was chanting?"
Xiao Lu said, "Couldn't catch it clearly. Sounded like classical Chinese." One time I worked up my courage, went up to the 2nd floor, and caught one line: "A minister slays his lord, a son slays his father. This is not the cause of a single morning or evening." She said, "Those are words from the Spring and Autumn Annals." I looked it up later.
She said, "And there's something else. 2 years ago, there was a tourist from out of town. When they were clearing the site at dusk, he wouldn't leave. He hid behind the cypress tree in the courtyard, saying he wanted to photograph the night scene. The next day he came to the office and told the director that he'd seen a person standing at the 3rd floor window, red face, long beard, wearing a green robe, standing there, half a body taller than the windowsill."
I said, "That must have been the statue. Even the seated statue was over a person's height."
Xiao Lu said, "That's what I told him. He said no, the statue is seated, but that figure was standing. He said the figure stood at the window for a while, seemed to glance down at the courtyard, and then retreated back inside. He said he was so scared he could barely hold his camera steady. When he left, his face was deathly pale, and he said to Xiao Lu, 'In this building of yours, what exactly are you enshrining? A person or a ghost?' Xiao Lu said of course it's Lord Guan. But in her heart she had her doubts. The next morning she went up to the 3rd floor and saw that in the incense burner in front of the statue, there were 3 sticks of incense that had burned halfway down. But when the site was cleared the night before, the burner had clearly been empty."
During the day, I went up to the 3rd floor again. On the offering table, a layer of ash had settled, and on top of it there was a circular mark. It wasn't shaped like something a person had stepped in, and it didn't look like a cat's print either, more like the hoof of some creature, pressed down, then lifted away, leaving a shallow ring. The mark wasn't big, about the size of an adult palm, and the depth was even, as if it had been set down gently. I measured it with a ruler. It was exactly in the center of the offering table, facing the statue.
I asked Lao Zhou, "What is this mark?"
Lao Zhou took a look and said, "A cat stepped there."
I said, "A cat couldn't make a mark like that."
Lao Zhou flicked his cigarette ash and said, "Then just pretend it wasn't a cat. If you don't go up to the tower at night, there won't be any mark at all."
I stayed in Xuchang for a few days. By day I worked, and by night I screwed up my courage and listened to that voice.
The voice didn't come every night. After sounding on the first night, it was quiet for 3 nights straight. On the 4th night it came again, still from the 3rd floor, still that archaic recitation, reading for a stretch, resting for a stretch. I got the idea to go up and look, but old Zhou's words came back to me, and I held myself back. Old Zhou, ask him anything, and he'd answer, but the moment he was done answering he'd shut his mouth, not offering anything more. I wore him down for 2 days before he'd open up.
Old Zhou said he came to work at the Spring Autumn Tower in 1968. Back then the building was still in disrepair. The Cultural Revolution had just wound down, the statues had been smashed, the building stood empty, and nobody was minding it. He was taking over the post from his master, Old Wei. Old Wei had kept watch over the Spring Autumn Tower his whole life, from the Republican era to liberation, from liberation to the Cultural Revolution.
The first time old Zhou heard the voice was in 1982, after the tower had been restored and reopened. He was on the night shift, heard noise from the 3rd floor in the middle of the night, figured it was a thief, and grabbed an iron shovel to head up. Old Wei grabbed him and held him back, saying, "Don't make a sound. Don't go upstairs."
Old Wei said, "The sound of someone reading in this building goes back to my master's generation. My master's master said that back in the Republican era, he was watching the building at night and heard it several times. Once, during a bout of fighting, a squad of routed soldiers hid in the building. They spent the night upstairs, and the next morning they all fled, saying there was someone up there reading books, reading so loud they couldn't sleep. My master's master said it was the building's old resident, nothing to worry about. You don't provoke it, and it won't bother you." The voice was reciting the Spring and Autumn Annals. Sometimes, as it read, the voice would tremble, like someone suppressing anger, unable to go on. Old Zhou said, during those dozen-plus years of the Cultural Revolution, the statues were smashed, the building sat empty, and the voice was gone too. In 1980 it was restored and new statues were made. On the night of May 13 the next year, the voice came back. I heard it clearly from the gatehouse, still that same tone, each word forced out one by one, like it was locked in a contest of wills with someone. I asked, "Did you ever go up to look?" Old Zhou said, "Once. In 1983, I was young, bold in the chest. I went up to the 3rd floor at night. In front of the statue, there was nothing. I stood there for 10 minutes. Just as I was about to head downstairs, someone behind me suddenly recited a line. The voice was right at my ear, like someone pasted to the back of my skull reading. The sweat on my spine came down in a single whoosh. I didn't dare turn my head. I backed down the stairs step by step. After that night, I never went up again." Old Zhou said that when he got downstairs, Old Wei was sitting in the gatehouse, his cigarette unlit, and asked him, "You heard it?" He said he heard it. Old Wei said, "You didn't turn around?" He said he didn't dare. Old Wei nodded and said, "That's right. The thing in this building, if you don't turn around, it takes you for a passerby. Turn around once, and it takes you for someone who came looking for it. Someone who comes looking, it won't let leave." He said, Old Wei was right. It doesn't hurt people. It just reads. Act like it doesn't exist, and it reads its own thing. Try to catch it, and it reads right up against your ear. I asked, "Then who is it, exactly?"
Old Zhou stubbed out his cigarette and said, "You ask me? Who do I ask?" Old Wei said his master's master once said something. Underneath this building, something is buried. The one reading, it's reading for the thing buried underneath. I spent those few days going through the Shouchan County records and the records of the Three Kingdoms cover to cover.
The more I read, the heavier my heart felt.
In the 3rd year of Jian'an, Cao Cao invited Emperor Xian of Han to go hunting at Shutian. Shutian, east of Xuchang City, was the royal hunting ground back then. On the day of the hunt, Cao Cao used the emperor's bow and arrows to shoot a deer. The ministers didn't know it was Cao Cao who had shot it. When they saw the deer fall, they knelt in unison and shouted, "Long live the emperor!" Cao Cao spurred his horse forward, riding ahead of Emperor Xian, and accepted the salute in the emperor's place. Guan Yu, who was following behind Liu Bei at the time, was so furious his brows shot straight up. He gripped his blade and was about to charge forward when Liu Bei grabbed hold of him and pulled him back. Throughout that entire hunt, Emperor Xian never said a single word. On the road back to the palace, the emperor said to the attendant beside him, "Look at this. Does this realm belong to the Liu family or to the Cao family?" The attendant didn't dare respond. Word of this later reached Cao Cao's ears. Cao Cao said nothing either, but from that day on, he never invited the emperor hunting again. The history books record that Liu Bei admonished Guan Yu, "Lord Cao has treated me well. What are you doing?" But the old folks in Xuchang tell another version. The old folks say what Liu Bei actually said when he held Guan Yu back was, "If you kill him, the emperor becomes a target. Endure it."
And the result of that endurance came in the 1st month of the 5th year of Jian'an, the Dongchang affair.
Dongchang was Emperor Xian's father-in-law. His daughter, noble consort Dong, was one of the emperor's consorts. In the 4th year of Jian'an, Dongchang and others received a secret edict hidden in the emperor's sash, plotting to eliminate Cao Cao. Before the plot could be carried out, word leaked out. In the 1st month of the 5th year of Jian'an, Cao Cao had Dongchang's entire household executed, wiping out all 3 clans. Noble consort Dong was Dongchang's daughter, and she was pregnant at the time. When Cao Cao killed Dongchang, he refused to spare her either. Emperor Xian pleaded for her life, saying the consort carried a child in her belly, begging Cao Cao to let her live. Cao Cao would not listen. Noble consort Dong was put to death right there in the palace at Shudu.
The old palace attendants say noble consort Dong was strangled with a length of white silk. When she died, the child in her belly had already begun to move. She didn't cry, didn't scream, she only begged the executioners to leave her body intact. The executioners were 2 elderly palace women whose hands shook terribly. It took them 2 tries to finish the job.
Cao Cao had Dongchang executed on charges of treason. The day the household was raided, the whole city of Shudu knew. The common folk dared not discuss it, but everyone remembered that day, the 9th day of the 1st month, overcast with wind so sharp it stung the face. The Dong family's blood ran from the main gate all the way to the street corner, and the next day the dirt on the road was still black. The book of the later Han records what Emperor Xian said. He said, "Go back and tell Cao Cao, I can't even protect my own woman. What's the point of being emperor anymore?" After I read that passage, I sat silent for a long time. Xiao Lu was peeling an apple nearby and said, "According to the old-timers, the place where noble consort Dong died is right around the Spring and Autumn Tower area." I said, "The Spring and Autumn Tower wasn't built until the Ming Dynasty. The Han Palace was at Zhangpan town east of the city, more than 20 li away." Xiao Lu said, "That's what the books say. But the old-timers tell it differently. The residence Cao Cao gave Guan Yu was right next to the palace walls. The courtyard where Guan Yu lived was separated by just 1 wall from the place where people died in the palace."
Old Joe was squatting at the doorway smoking, and when he heard us talking, he cut in, "You trust what's in the books. But what's underground, the books don't have that." In the 19th year of Jian'an, another empress died.
Empress Fu was Emperor Xian of Han's first wife. She couldn't stomach Cao Cao's monopoly on power, so she wrote a secret letter to her father Fu Wan, saying Cao Cao was cruel and asking him to find a way to eliminate Cao Cao. That letter was hidden for over 10 years, and only in the 19th year of Jian'an was it finally exposed. Cao Cao sent Shi Lu and Hua Xian to lead troops into the palace and search out Empress Fu. The empress, hair disheveled and barefoot, clutched Emperor Xian's hand and wept, saying, "Can't you save me?" Emperor Xian said, "My own life. I don't even know how many more days I have." The Romance of the Three Kingdoms describes it vividly. Hua Xian led troops to search the palace. Empress Fu was so terrified she hid in a cavity between the palace walls, and Hua Xian grabbed her by the hair and dragged her out, hauling her all the way before Emperor Xian. When Emperor Xian saw her, he wept until he couldn't speak. The empress tugged at Emperor Xian's robe and said, "Can't you save my life?" Emperor Xian said, "My own life. I don't even know whose hands it's in." According to historical records, Empress Fu was locked in the violent chamber, the palace prison, and died in confinement. Her 2 sons were killed by Cao Cao with poison wine. That year, there were only 6 years left before the fall of the Han Dynasty. Elderly people in Shudu said that on that day, crying came from the palace, audible even through 2 layers of palace walls. The dogs in the city barked all night. The next day, several pieces of women's clothing floated in the ditch outside the palace gate. No one dared to fish them out. I told this story to Director Han. Director Han is the head of the Spring and Autumn Tower Cultural Relics Management Office, in his 60s, wearing a pair of reading glasses. He's a local of Xuchang and has spent his whole life working with cultural relics. After listening, he took off his glasses, wiped them, and said, "In those 25 years in Shudu, of the people who died in the palace, the ones written down in history are only a few names. The ones not written down, they're all in the earth." He said, "Even an empress couldn't be master of her own life. Shudu, in terms of feng shui, it's said to gather qi. But what it gathers is dragon qi and killing qi too. The dragon qi nourished Cao Cao. The killing qi, how many people it killed, there's no counting." He said, "Don't think of the Spring and Autumn Tower as just a temple now. What this area was before the Ming Dynasty, nobody can say for sure. Underneath the old city, layers upon layers, Han bricks, Tang tiles, Song earth, Ming walls. Dig 3 meters down, and you might just hit something from the Han Dynasty."
I said, "Has anything ever been dug up?"
Director Han said, "How could there not be?" In 1986, when they were repairing the sewer line on Wenmiao Front Street, they dug up a section of a Han Dynasty brick wall, still with rammed earth on top. The construction crew didn't dare touch it. The cultural relics people went to look and said it was the foundation of the Han Palace City Wall. That foundation wall is right behind the Spring and Autumn Tower, less than 100 meters away. He said, "So when the old folks say Lady Dong died around this area of the Spring and Autumn Tower, you can't say it's completely groundless. The edge of the Han Palace is right under our feet." In the 25th year of Jinan, Chao Pai received the abdication at Fanyang and ascended the throne as emperor, naming his state Wei. Emperor Xian of Han personally handed over the imperial seal, was enfeoffed as Duke of Shanyang, and moved to Shanyang, where he died of illness a few years later. The place where the abdication happened is Fanqing Town, 30 li south of Xuchang City. To this day, an abdication platform still stands there. It's made of rammed earth, 7 or 8 meters tall, with its top covered in weeds. I went to see it once. Standing at the foot and looking up, the platform squatted there dark and heavy, like an old beast lying low. Beside the platform stand 2 steels. One is the Abdication Memorial, the other the memorial of the officials and generals presenting the honorific title. The inscriptions were composed by Wang Lang, the characters written by Liang Hu, and the carving done by Zhong Yao. People call them the Steel of 3 Wonders. I squatted in front of the steel and looked for a while. The characters on it, stroke by stroke, square and even, carried an energy that meant to settle things once and for all. As if once those words were carved into stone, the Han Dynasty was truly gone. An old man in Fancheng said the abdication platform was the last palace of the Han Dynasty. The earth around the platform is different from elsewhere. dark, and hard underfoot, like a threshing ground rammed down over hundreds of years. It was on this platform that Emperor Xian gave away his realm. The old man said there was something buried under the platform. I asked what was buried there. He said the story passed down by the elders was that the platform was built with earth from the Han Palace, and that earth was soaked with the blood of people who died inside the palace. Using blood-soaked earth to build the platform was meant to press the Han Dynasty's fortune beneath it. There's another matter about the Baling Bridge. West of Xuchang City is a Baling Bridge, spanning the Shouchan River. The bridge was rebuilt in the Ming Dynasty, and the deck is paved with blue stone slabs. The elders said that this is the very spot where Guan Yu took leave of Cao Cao back then. The water under the bridge connects with the waterways of the Han Palace. When the Han Palace disposed of someone, the body was not taken out through the palace gate. It was carried out through the water gate in the city wall, floated downstream to the west of the city, and when it reached the Baling Bridge, the water slowed and it sank.
When Xiao Lu told me this, I said, "That's way too creepy." Xiao Lu said, "Creepy or not, go look under the bridge and you'll know." The bridge piers are old stone, and every year red moss grows in the cracks. The elders say that's not moss, it's the color soaked out of whatever is down there in the water.
I'd taken it as just a passing remark. But that afternoon, passing by the Baling River, I squatted at the bridgehead and looked for a while. In the cracks between the pier stones, sure enough, there was a dark red thing, patch after patch, as if it had seeped out of the stone. I poked it with a twig. It stuck to the stone and wouldn't come off, as if it had grown into the rock. An old man who watched over the bridge happened by and said, "Don't poke at that. That's the years. The water under this bridge has been red for 800 years. Baling Bridge stands west of Xuchang City. These days no one walks across it anymore. The new bridge was built beside it, and the old one is cordoned off with iron chains, kept there for people to look at."
The old bridge isn't long, a dozen or so steps gets you from one end to the other. The deck is paved with blue stone slabs, polished shiny by hundreds of years of footsteps and rain. In the middle of the bridge there's one slab that's different from the rest, there's a hollow pressed into it, round, like a horse's hoofprint. Next to the hoofprint, there's also a long mark, straight, running from one end of the slab to the other, like it was cut by a blade.
At the head of the bridge stands a stele, and the inscription tells the story of Guan Yu declining Cao Cao's farewell. In the 5th year of Zhenan, Guan Yu learned where Liu Bei was. He sealed up the gold and silver that Cao Cao had gifted him, hung up his official seal and returned the money, and with his 2 sister-in-laws in tow, left through the west gate of Xuchang to go find Liu Bei. When Cao Cao got word of this, he led his men in pursuit all the way to Baling Bridge, where he presented Guan Yu with a brocade robe as a send-off. Guan Yu, fearing a trap, refused to dismount. He reined in his horse in the middle of the bridge, used his green dragon crescent blade to hook the robe over, draped it over himself, and from horseback clasped his hands toward Cao Cao in salute, saying, "When we meet again, I will surely repay your kindness." With that, he spurred his horse across the bridge, never looking back. That was what the stele inscription said. The stele was re-erected in the Qing dynasty. On the back of the stele, a poem was carved, and I remember 2 lines clearly. "Beneath Baling Bridge the water flows long, unending the grief of heroes through ages." The bridge keeper told me that the hoofprint on the bridge deck was made by Guan Yu's horse. That long mark was cut by the green dragon crescent blade when he hooked the robe over. He said those 2 marks sweat water every rainy season, like they were perspiring.
It happened to be raining that day. I crouched down on the bridge deck and reached out to touch the hoofprint. Water was indeed pooled in the print, murky water, tinged with a dark red. I dipped a finger in it and brought it under my nose to smell. There was no particular odor, just rainwater.
But I couldn't shake the feeling that the water was cold in a way that was wrong. Autumn rain shouldn't be this cold. It was cold like well water, drilling from my fingertips straight into my bones. When I stood up, my knees felt a little weak. The bridge keeper called to me from a distance. Don't keep squatting there touching it. That print. The old folks passed down the rule that if you touch it once, you'll be cold for half a day. I didn't tell him that the cold had actually shot all the way from my fingertip to the back of my neck. I took shelter from the rain under the eaves of the Guandi temple at the head of the bridge, where I met an old man who tended the temple. When the old man heard me bring up the hoofprint, he said, "That's nothing." He lowered his voice and said, "One year there was a great drought. The Shouchan River dried up, and the riverbed cracked open from the sun. Someone went down into the riverbed to catch fish and got to a spot under the bridge, where he discovered that behind one of the bridge pilings there was a hole, pitch black, tall enough for a person to stand in. The man threw a stone inside. Half a day passed and he never heard it hit bottom."
I asked, and then?
The old man said, later the river filled back up and the hole was submerged. No one ever saw it again. But that year, the man who went down to catch fish fell sick when he got home. He ran a fever for 3 days, and when he was delirious he kept muttering nonsense, saying there were people inside the hole reciting texts. His family went to the head of the bridge and burned spirit money. Only then did he get better?
I asked the old man, "That hole, did no one really ever go down into it again?" The old man said, "They did. During the Great Drought of 1963, the county organized work teams to dredge the river channel. Someone tied a rope around himself and went down to take a look. When he came back up, his face was white. He said the hole was dry, and a lot of things were jammed in the cracks between the rocks, bone fragments, scraps of cloth. Nobody dared touch them. The county workers filled the opening with dirt. The old man said, on the day they filled it in, all the laborers were young men. No one spoke. They finished and left, and not one of them looked back. The old man said, everyone says this bridge is where Guan Yu hooked his robe, but the water under this bridge connects to the city. All the people who died in this city over the years, they all traveled by water. Under this bridge, too many things have passed through. I spent 2 weeks in Xuchang, finished the job, and it was time to head back to the provincial capital. But before I left, I made a request to Curator Han. I wanted to spend one night on the 3rd floor of the Spring and Autumn Tower.
Curator Han took off his reading glasses and looked at me for a long time, then said, "You heard that voice?"
I said, I heard it. He said, you heard it, and you still want to go up? I said, I just want to know what it is.
Curator Han laughed and said, young people, bold hearts. He opened the drawer and pushed a brass key in front of me. He said, I've had the 3rd floor door locked for 20 years. There are 2 keys total, one with me, one at the Cultural Relics Bureau. I'll lend it to you tonight. If anything happens, you're on your own. After saying that, he added, 20 years ago, someone else borrowed this key from me too, a professor at the city normal school who studied the 3 kingdoms. He said he wanted to verify the layout of the Spring and Autumn Tower and stayed one night. The next morning, he returned the key. He looked awful and left without a word. He never came again. I asked Curator Han what happened to that professor. Curator Han said, nothing. It's just that after that, he never wrote another article about the Spring and Autumn Tower.
Old Joe found out about this and blocked my way at the door, saying, forgot the rules?
I said, I'm just going up to sit for a bit. Old Joe said, Old Wei said, when you hear the voice, don't make a sound, don't go upstairs. But you just had to pick going upstairs. I said, 30 years, and you've never wanted to figure it out?
Old Joe was silent for a moment, then said, what's there to figure out? It chants its own, I keep my own watch. It doesn't harm people, and I don't provoke it. This tower has just this little bit of peace. He paused, then added, if you insist on going, remember one thing, when you hear the voice, don't turn around. If it chants right up against you, just pretend you didn't hear it. The moment you turn around, it's ruined.
I said, ruined what?
Old Joe didn't answer. He threw his cigarette butt on the ground, ground it out with his foot, and turned to walk away. That night, with the key in my pocket, I went up to the third floor alone. The candle in front of the statue, old Joe made an exception and didn't put it out. He said, "If you're keeping the night watch, keep the lamp lit. With it lit, it'll chant its own and won't press up against you." I sat on the cushion in front of the statue, my back against the wall, and waited. The clock at the train station rang every now and then in the distance. I waited, and my heart grew calmer and calmer, so calm I could hear my own heartbeat. Then the voice came. At 11:40, the sound came. It came from the direction of the statue. At first it was faint, like wind leaking through a crack in a window, but then it grew clearer and clearer, word by word, drilling into my ears. Still that old-fashioned accent, slow, heavy, carrying a suppressed anger. I made out a few words.
"He who slays the sovereign, let all under heaven join in condemning him."
The voice paused for a moment, then rose again. This time it was closer to me, as if someone were standing right behind me, reciting right against my ear.
"When a minister slays his lord, when a son slays his father."
I wanted to turn my head. My neck was frozen stiff, it wouldn't move. I stared at the statue. The statue sat upright in the candlelight, left hand stroking its beard, right hand clutching a scroll. The face was red, the eyes half open, half closed. I remembered seeing it during the day, and it had looked exactly like this. The voice drew nearer again. This time it wasn't behind me, it was above, directly above my head, the breath of someone reciting, making my scalp prickle. I counted my heartbeats. On the 7th beat, I jerked my head to the side and looked up. Above me was the roof beam, empty, nothing there at all. But the voice, it was still there. Only then did I realize, the voice wasn't coming from the statue's direction, and it wasn't coming from the roof beam either. It was coming from the room itself, from every direction, from the cracks in the walls, from beneath the floorboards, as if the entire building were chanting. Suddenly I remembered the line Xiao Lu had made out on the 2nd floor, "When a minister slays his lord, when a son slays his father, it is not the doing of a single morning or evening." The words being chanted above my head now were exactly that line. It wasn't reciting for my benefit. It had been reciting it over and over, for 1800 years, like a stone worn smooth by water in a river for 1800 years, all its edges ground round, yet still that same sentence. I stood up. My legs were weak. The candle flame suddenly shot up a stretch, then sank back down. And in that moment, I saw it, the statue's eyes had opened. No. Not opened. The statue's eyes had always been painted on, half open, half closed, painted dead. But in that instant, those two eyes were clearly looking at me. The candlelight flickered, and the gaze flickered with it, as if alive. My head buzzed. I forgot everything else, scrambled and crawled down the stairs. The wooden steps thudded under my feet, the whole building shaking. I burst out through the building's door. Old Joe stood in the courtyard, flashlight off, the tip of his cigarette glowing and dimming. He said, "Seen something?" I gasped for breath and said, How did you know?"
Old Joe said, "Your footsteps. 30 years ago, I came running down the same way." He paused, then said, "In 1986, there was an antiquities dealer who went up to the 3rd floor in the night. When he came down, he was running the exact same way. The next day, he told people he hadn't seen anything. Half a month after he got back, he was in a car accident. Gone. On the day the dealer died, I went to his funeral. His family was crying, and I didn't dare say that he'd spent a night in the Spring and Autumn Tower. Some things, no one would believe you if you said them, but you can't let them go in your own heart."
I said, "That statue, its eyes."
Old Joe said, "The statue never opened its eyes. It's always been like that. Painted on, half open, half closed." He said, "The more you're afraid it's looking at you, the more you think it's looking at you. What Old Wei said, this thing knows people. If there's a ghost in your heart, then there's a ghost in it. If there's no ghost in your heart, it's just a clay idol.
I said, but I clearly saw.
Old Zhou cut me off. What you saw was the fear in your own heart, magnified and placed on its face. He let out a sigh and said, go back. First thing tomorrow morning, leave when you can. The business in this building isn't something just anyone can understand.
The next day, Master Zheng found out I'd gone up to the 3rd floor at night and gave me a scolding. He said, people who work with cultural relics need steady hands and a steady heart. If your heart isn't steady, you might as well change careers. But that night, Master didn't sleep well either. Early the next morning, with dark circles under both eyes, he quietly told me, when I was young, I worked on repairs at the Confucius Temple in Xufu. One time I was on night duty and heard the chime bells in the Great Hall ringing. Clang, clang, clang for half the night. I went in to check. The bells were hanging fine, nobody had touched them. He said, back then I was just like you, I had to find out what it meant. Later my own master told me one thing. Some sounds aren't meant for you to hear. They're meant for the place itself. If you insist on hearing them and you understand them, then you won't be able to leave.
Master said that time in Xufu was the first and only time his master ever told him about the temple's affairs. His master said, the ones enshrined in temples are all people who became something else. The breath they didn't finish breathing still lingers in the temple. You can hear it, that means your heart is calm. You insist on searching for it, that means your heart is restless. People with restless hearts can't stay.
He said, I never went back to Xufu after that. I asked him, did you understand it?
Master didn't answer. He walked away with his hands behind his back. The afternoon before I left, Old Zhou took me to the back courtyard. There was an old locust tree back there, who knows how many years old, its trunk so thick it took 2 people to wrap their arms around it. Old Zhou took a shovel and dug a shallow pit at the base of the tree roots. About a foot down, he uncovered an oilcloth bundle. He opened the oilcloth, and inside was something caked in mud, round, like a human head.
Old Zhou said, this is what Old Wei hid away.
During the Cultural Revolution, the Red Guards wanted to smash the statues in the Spring and Autumn Tower. Old Wei snuck up the tower in the middle of the night, removed the statue's head, wrapped it in oilcloth, and hid it in the woodpile. Then he made a fake head out of mud and put it back on the statue. The next day when the Red Guards came to smash things, they smashed the fake mud head. The real head, Old Wei hid it his whole life.
Old Zhou said Old Wei never married, never had children. He treated that head like his own child. Every year on the 23rd day of the 12th lunar month, Old Wei would take the head out of its oilcloth, wipe it clean with a soft cloth, then wrap it back up and bury it again.
Before he died, Old Wei gave the head to Old Zhou. He said, the head has eyes, and the eyes have memory. Don't give it away. If you give it away, it will forget who it is.
Old Zhou said, I didn't give it away. I buried it here, buried it for nearly 20 years.
I asked, does the sound of reading in this tower have anything to do with this head? Old Zhou said, I don't know. Old Wei said, as long as the head is here, it's here, once the head leaves, it leaves. He looked at me and said, if you want to understand, then wait a few more years. The day this tower breaks ground again, you'll understand.
The day I left, Old Zhou walked me to the front gate. He said, you'll come back.
I asked. He said, everyone who's heard the sound of reading will come back.
I came to Xuchang again in 2004. That year, the Spring-Autumn Tower underwent major repairs, and the backyard was to be paved with blue brick. When the construction crew dug down about a meter, at the base of the east wall, they uncovered a brick well. The well mouth was sealed with a stone slab, and the slab was weighed down by a stone bar carved with characters. Worn down to only half remaining, faint traces of the 4 characters Han So Ting Ho. That was Guan Gong's title. The construction crew didn't dare touch it and reported it to the Cultural Relics Office. Director Han had already retired. The new director brought people over and pried open the stone slab at the well mouth. When the slab was lifted, everyone there smelled something. Not rot, but dampness. Like an old house's cellar, centuries of trapped moisture rushing out all at once. Someone shone a light down the well and shouted, "There's something down there." The well wasn't deep, about 3 meters to the bottom. There was no water at the bottom, just thick layers of mud. Lying in the mud were 2 skeletons. The 2 skeletons lay on top of each other, head to head, curled up, as if they'd been thrown in. No coffin, no burial goods, not even a scrap of clothing. The archaeological team cleaned the site for 3 days and concluded, both were female Han Dynasty bones. One was in her early 20s, her pelvis showing signs of having given birth. The other was younger, 15 or 16 at most. Later the bones were sent to the provincial capital for carbon-14 dating, which placed them between 200 and 240 AD. Exactly the 20-odd years Emperor Xian of Han ruled from Su. The archaeological team said neither skeleton showed signs of struggling when they died, as if they'd been bound, or blindfolded, and thrown in. From the mud at the bottom of the well, they also fished out a bronze seal, the size of a fingertip, with characters carved on its face. The seal was reversed. The team spent ages taking an impression, and recognized one character, Dong.
Dong.
I stood by the well, watching the 2 skeletons being loaded into body bags and carried onto the Cultural Relics Office truck. The new director said the well's position was in the backyard of the Spring-Autumn Tower, at the base of the east wall, right next to the old locust tree where Old Wei had buried the statue head. The locust tree had died 2 years earlier, been cut down and its roots dug out.
That night, I got a call from Old Joe. Old Joe had retired and gone back to the countryside. On the phone he said, "The reading sound is gone."
I said, "Are you sure?"
He said, "I've listened to it in this tower for over 30 years. When it sounds, when it doesn't, I know better than anyone. From the moment you opened up that well, it hasn't sounded again." He said, "I told you before it wasn't attached to the tower, it was attached to this piece of ground. Now you understand, what it was waiting for was someone to come take away the people at the bottom of the well."
I said, "Then who was doing the reading?"
Old Joe said, "Old Wei said it before, whatever has been reading in this tower has been reading the Spring and Autumn Annals for 1800 years. Guan Yu read the annals at night. What he read was other people's stories. But the dead he saw with his own eyes, right by the courtyard where he lived, thrown into a well, 1800 years, no one claimed them. He remembered them on their behalf. When he'd finished remembering, he left."
I said, "That seal, it was the character Dong. Was it Consort Dong?"
Old Joe was silent for a long time, then said, "Whether it was or wasn't, it doesn't matter anymore. Names are kept by the living. The dead only remember one thing, that they were thrown into a well."
He said, "Listen, this tower now, how quiet it is."
Old Joe said he'd made a special trip back to Xuchang on the day the well was dug, stood in the backyard, and looked at the well mouth. He said, "The head I buried for 20 years, I don't know where it ended up either. But that day, standing by the well, I suddenly felt light in my heart, like someone had patted me on the shoulder and said, 'Okay, the remembering is done. Let it go.' He said, 'This tower, from now on, is just an ordinary temple.'"
After the phone call ended, I stood in the courtyard and looked up at the 3rd floor. The window was dark, no candle, no sound.
Later, I went to Xuchang 2 more times. The Spring-Autumn Tower had been renovated, tourists had increased, and the incense was burning strong. A new statue had replaced the old one on the 3rd floor, taller and more spirited than the old. The clay head Old Joe had mentioned, along with the roots of the old locust tree, had vanished without a trace during that major renovation.
The new caretaker was a young man. I asked him, "Have you ever heard the reading sound at night?" He laughed and said, "No. Young people these days, who still reads the Spring and Autumn Annals?" I stood at the base of the tower, looking up at the third-floor window. The window was empty. Daylight came through from the other side, clean and bright.
On the train back to the provincial capital, I kept thinking about what old Zhou had said. As the train passed Xuchang station, I looked out the window. At the edge of the wheat fields, a corner of the Spring-Autumn Tower's eaves showed itself, dark against the setting sun. I thought of the poem inscribed on the steel. The waters under Baling Bridge flow on. The hero's eternal grief will never be done. The water is still there, the bridge is still there, but the sound of reading, it's gone.
Old Zhou once said, "Anyone who has heard the reading sound will come back." I came. It didn't read again. The story is finished. What do you think? If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. New urban legend every day. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. New urban legend every day.